that you can see in virtually any of these protest sites. And they have asked me, for example, to come to New York to talk about some of these things. So I think over time, you won't necessarily have some grand written agenda, but you'll have, as I say, increasing consensus. And it's a very broad consensus. It's not left, it's not right, it's not Republican, it's not Democrat.
You know, as Democracy Now! Covers the Occupy Wall Street movement in New York, there are a lot of pizza boxes that are used for signs, the back of pizza boxes, because pizzas are being sent in to the protesters from all over the world. They put in orders to the local pizzerias and they're sent in. I mean, there are orders coming in from Cairo, from Madison, Wisconsin, and they all go to the people who are staying there overnight. And one of the signs that one of the protesters was holding said, "We'll believe corporations are people when Texas executes one." Can you talk about the idea of corporations as people, corporate personhood?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of my hats is I'm a lawyer, and it's bad law. And so one of the best ways to change this is simply to appoint better justices to the Supreme Court. And this is a 5-4 decision, so one justice could make an enormous amount of difference.
First, explain what it is.
It goes all the way back to the Civil Rights era, Civil Rights amendments after the Civil War. Those amendments were supposed to, of course, protect the freedmen and women. They were quickly perverted by the Supreme Court, which is a really ultra-right-wing, pro-slavery group for most of our history, into saying, we're not going to protect the slaves, freed slaves very much, but we are going to protect corporations. And so they interpreted the 14th Amendment and 15th Amendment in particular as giving due process rights to corporations as persons. Over time, they extended that under First Amendment cases that said they have not the same rights, but substantial rights that need to be protected in the First Amendment. And now they've gone whole hog in Citizens United and produced an atrocity, right? In a country that was already overwhelmed with corporate influence, they said all the restraints essentially are off, and you have almost complete constitutional protection to do anything. And so the domination by corporations, and in particular by finance, which is now the biggest funder of both parties, is going to grow very substantially unless we fight back.
We're talking to William Black, who worked in the Reagan administration. He's a professor at University of Missouri, Kansas City. I've got two papers here in Kansas City, here in this convention center, USA Today, head story, student loan debt surpasses $1 trillion, burden could drag economy in future. And then I've got the Wall Street Journal top story, pain spreads to biggest banks. Goldman posts a rare loss. Bank of America falls from #1 spot. Comment on these stories.
Well, I've, by the way, just written one myself 15 minutes before coming here on Bank of America, because it just broke yesterday that affiliates of Bank of America, this is Merrill Lynch, with really bad derivatives, has been allowed by the Federal Reserve to transfer perhaps many billions or perhaps even trillions, we don't know, of these derivatives to Bank of America, which is where we come in as a federal guarantee, and it puts us on the hook as the government. This is obscene public policy, the kind that would have never been permitted in our era, and now under a Democratic president that rails about excess influence and not putting the taxpayers at risk. That's exactly what they're doing. So the story on the regulatory side, we had the leading failed regulator in a Federal Reserve Bank, Geithner, and they promoted him to Treasury Secretary. We had the leading failed regulator in America, Bernanke, and he was reappointed. So and most of the wrecking crew was left on as temporary folks. So most of the wrecking crew is still in place. We have almost no effective regulation, and it's showing up. They hid the losses by changing the accounting rules through congressional extortion. of the Financial Accounting Standards Board. And these problems don't go away, they just fester, and they pop up 3 years later, and they're going to keep popping up until we start telling the truth. In terms of the student debt, this is a grand disaster in America. The one thing that you want, for almost everybody agrees with, for international competitiveness, for simply just for our kids, is to have free public education, and that anybody with a talent where it makes sense for them to go to university should go to university and not be a debt slave for the rest of their lives. So this is insane public policy that is crushing the nation. We can change it at any time. It's a perfect win-win in a great recession because you want to spend to get out of the recession anyway. So that's one of the things we should spend on. And the fact that we're doing it shows just how insane the policy paralysis has become.
What do you think should happen with Bernanke? What should happen with Timothy Geithner?
Well, Geithner should be fired because you can fire him. Holder, who is the Attorney General, should be fired. They need to be replaced. The other folks running the banking regulatory agencies can be replaced by effective actings. You don't have to go through the confirmation process to jumpstart that. Bernanke you can't fire, but you can ask for his resignation, and it's long since time to ask for his resignation. And, you know, you can give him a nice ceremony and have him go.
But clearly, President Obama is not going in this direction, and we're moving into the 2012 election. It is predicted he's going to raise over $1 billion. One of the lead presidential contenders on the Republican side, Mitt Romney, is raising far more from Wall Street. And then you have Herman Cain, who at this point seems to be ahead of them all, who comes from right here in Kansas City.
He does. They're not sending Godfather pizza boxes to the protesters, are they?
I haven't checked the most recent labels. Perhaps Herman Cain himself did.
It's your fault.
But that's not where we're headed right now.
No, it's not where we're headed, and that's a grave disappointment to folks who thought that, well, someone campaigned saying, yes, we can. And now it's become, well, actually, we're not even going to try on the prosecutorial side. Right? So if he continues this way, it's conceivable the Republicans will nominate someone so bad that he will be reelected, but he will destroy the effectiveness of his administration and do tremendous damage to the nation.
Well, I want to thank you very much for being with us. William Black, white-collar criminologist, former financial regulator, worked in the Reagan administration, author of The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One. He's Associate Professor of Economics and Law at the University of Missouri, Kansas City.